Okay. So, just started our go live. No idea what I'm doing. And we will wait and see if anyone will be joining us today. I put live on TikTok too, and I have no idea what is happening. Oh. But all right, everything's looking good. So I see some people on TikTok, and since I don't have anyone on the other stream yet, I keep getting asked to co host, and I don't know what that means. So if anyone wants to send a quick message on what that is in TikTok Live, I would appreciate it. Don't know why anyone would want to co host. Swipe right to filter your comment. Okay, cool. Anyways, so don't know what co hosting is on TikTok Live. Got about 3 minutes till we start, but we are here to answer any payroll questions that anyone has. So hopefully, we get some easy questions since we are live. But if anyone that has joined on TikTok has a payroll question, we can open it up now and get started. So, yeah, my name is Christina Haganey, president of Valor Payroll Solutions, and we help small business owners with payroll. So, as of right now, we are working with about 200 clients across the country, and really have been doing this payroll in general for about 15 or 16 years. And basically everything keeps changing. And of course, right now we have the big, beautiful bill that is going to be voted on pretty soon. And that could eliminate the tax on overtime and tips. So, of course, in the payroll industry, we are waiting to see how that pans out because, of course, that would affect what we do in payroll. But I think more importantly, to clarify for employees that they are not completely eliminating the tax on tips and overtime. This is specific to federal income tax. So there, would still be state tax on those as well as Social Security and Medicare tax. So it's not like it will just be free money if the bill ends up being passed. Another thing I was reading is that I don't think it was the majority, but a vast quantity of tipped employees make less than the standard deduction. So at the end of the day, this really isn't going to be as impactful as it may seem at face value. But of course, just like anything else, we're waiting to see if it gets approved with changes and what that looks like. But as of right now, they are saying that the bill should be voted on by July 4th. And Trump is even saying, prepare to be flexible and not go on holiday if this isn't done. So, anyways, we are waiting to see what happens with that. Like I mentioned, I've been doing payroll for about 15 years now, and I don't want to say it was ever really simple because that's not the case. Each state has different laws. There's different federal laws. But it has definitely become more and more complicated as the years have gone on. And that is everything. Recently it was PPP loans, ERC, but we are also seeing a lot of changes at the state level where states are now coming in and mandating for employers to provide retirement plans, for employers to provide paid sick leave, for employers to have paid family medical leave benefits as a requirement at the state level. So we are just seeing increasing regulation year after year. And I don't think that that is going to change. If anything, we may become more uniform as it becomes, commonplace where every state has a paid sick leave law, for example. But those will still be different state by state. So I see some comments coming in. So Micah, go ahead if you have a question. You can, I guess, tap that in the chat. I am old enough to not be good with technology anymore. So anyways, trying my best here with the TikTok live. I'm still waiting to see if anyone joins us on the other platforms. Let's see. Got a few people joining here, but again, so we are live for payroll questions, and that can be from a business owner perspective or even from an employee perspective. If you have questions about your paycheck or overtime pay, being paid fairly, correctly, pretty much anything is fair game. We're just here to see if we can help and share some knowledge. Let's see. Lots of people joining, no questions. But I can talk about payroll all day, so I'll just keep going. It's kind of touched on the big, beautiful bill, which of course is still awaiting to be passed. There is another bill on the table right now that would impact the taxation of tips. But unlike the big, beautiful bill, this other bill would allow employees to claim tips on their income tax return. So it wouldn't really change the tax withheld from their tips throughout the year. From a logistical perspective of coming from the payroll realm, we would obviously have to do some things pretty quickly if the big, beautiful bill gets rolled out and they do change the taxation on tips and overtime. But the other bill that would allow employees to claim the tips, that really wouldn't impact the logistics of processing payroll. That would just change what happens when employees go to file the tax returns. So anyways, it just depends what happens if one or both gets passed and what changes we see, because as of right now, still waiting for that to go through. But we should have more information here by the 4th of July, they're saying. But of course, we are never 100% certain. Let's see. I don't know what's happening in here. If anyone wants to send me some information on what to do in here, I see a lot of people joining. Thanks, Brandon. But would love a question so I don't have to just rattle on and on and on. Let's see, what else in payroll? Big changes happened recently to the employee versus contractor classification. Oh, we have a question. Go ahead, Brandon. Hopefully that comes up where I can see it. Oh gosh. Okay. Well, if anyone has any payroll questions, that's what we're here for. So recently I guess it was last year, there were a few changes to the classification of employee versus contractor, which in effect didn't change a lot, but just from my perspective, what I imagine will happen is that there will be more oversight and crackdown on misclassifying W-2 employees as independent contractors. And of course, if you're a business owner, it's kind of always been the case that people dig into the gray area of employee versus contractor, um, rather than just properly classifying them. So, all how do I get people to quit asking to co-host? Um, so, what this means is employees are those who are working for you. Independent contractors are those who are in business for themselves. And that is just simple terms. That is not any type of legal description. But when you're thinking about a worker, sometimes people get really hung up on if they're bringing their own equipment or if they can make their own schedules. And at the end of the day, that is not really going to be the basis for how you should be classifying your workers. It's really who has control over the work being performed. And so for your W 2 employees, that is going to be you are directing when they work, what they're doing, probably giving them some sort of training. They have your company email. They are they're doing things your way to accomplish your goals. You're usually paying them on a set pay frequency. Um, and, the difference then with a contractor, if you think about a contractor, they have their own business. So you're not going to set their pay rates. Like if you called a plumber to fix something in your house, that's an independent contractor. And they're going to come in and they're going to tell you how much you owe them and when you owe them and how you can pay them because they are in business for themselves. That's a true independent contractor. W-2 employees, you're going to pay them, you decide how often, every other Friday or twice a month, whatever the case is. But if you are the one that has control over that aspect of when and how they are paid, that's another key indication that you have a W-2 employee and not an independent contractor. Oftentimes we'll see business owners opting to misclassify their workers as independent contractors to save money on taxes. And while that may be true that you do not have to pay certain employer taxes if you have an independent contractor, if you are misclassifying them, and especially purposefully misclassifying them, and you are caught, you will not only have to pay those employer taxes anyway, but you could end up owing some of the tax that should have been withheld from that worker's check. You will also have to go back and refile all of your payroll tax filings. You will have to correct that 1099, zero it out, and issue a W-2 instead. So it's not just a simple decision. It's really not a decision. It's not an option. There's a right and a wrong way to classify the workers. And a lot of times business owners think of it as an option, like they can do this or this. And that's not the case. It's dependent on how much control you have over the worker. Are they in business for themselves? And then a new thing that came out with the updates last year was totally lost my train of thought here. Oh, if they are performing an integral part of your business. So if you're paying them to do something that you charge your clients for, they are probably a W-2 employee and not an independent contractor. And if you do this the wrong way, again, you will have to pay those taxes anyway, but then you will also be subject to penalties and interest. Once you do go back and file those payroll tax returns, you might have to pay some of the tax that you should have withheld from your workers. So it can really snowball. And at the end of the day, of course, we recommend properly classifying your workers and, pay the taxes that you are supposed to be paying for that worker, pay workers' comp. Another thing that people don't realize is the tax doesn't go away. So when you have an employee, you're paying half of the Social Security, you're paying half of the Medicare tax, you're paying federal and state unemployment tax, you're paying workers' comp premiums. If you misclassify a worker as an independent contractor, you are passing the burden of the employer portion of Social Security and Medicare tax onto that worker. So that worker is actually going to pay an additional 7.65% in self-employment tax versus what would have been withheld for their half of Social Security and Medicare on their check. So at the end of the day, again, do things the right way. Saying that you can't afford to do it the right way is not going to be a justifiable reason for doing it wrong. And if you are caught, you will end up not just owing a bunch of money, penalties, interest, but really, if you're a small business owner, you're going to be so tied up in fixing all of these issues. I know for me, if I had something that pulled me away from my business for an extended period of time, that would be a major issue. And so that's, we always try to educate our clients and really just educate anyone about payroll. Because that mistake, although in my experience, I have not seen a lot of small businesses get audited or in trouble for this. So the risk of audit is low, but the consequences will be significant if you are audited and forced to reclassify those wages. Another question, what do you think of the service Rippling? So with what I do, we service payroll for small business clients. And I also do a lot of projects for non-clients. And so I see when other payroll companies mess up, that doesn't mean that they're always messing up. But I have worked on projects for clients of Rippling where there were major tax issues that we had to go in and help fix. But again, I don't think it would be fair to say that as a general statement that is the case. It's not the platform that we use, so I don't have extensive experience with Rippling. I would say if you're, considering a change to Rippling, that you just do your research. Reddit has seemed to be a very popular resource now to get information about businesses where you can see comments from actual users. So yeah, that's about all I can say about Rippling. We don't use it. I've done some projects to fix some things that they messed up for clients, but again, I don't think it would be fair as a general statement to say, to offer an opinion of the platform in general. Why am I on live doing this? I don't know. I have a marketing person and we decided that we would try this. And so here we are. And, just gauging interest. I know there's a lot that not just business owners, which are, the people that we work with, but employees in general never get an education on payroll and what has been withheld and, what goes into their check and deductions. And so there's just this huge lack of knowledge about payroll. And, we're just here to kind of fill in the gaps. So it's what we do. It's what we're passionate about. I have a team of great ladies that, are knowledgeable about payroll. And so we're just kind of here trying to shift the industry a little bit and provide the knowledge that seems to be missing. Oftentimes payroll is kind of treated as lesser than accounting or HR. Early in my career, I kind of had the choice to do payroll or HR, and I opted to stick with the payroll route against popular opinion. And HR just wasn't my jam. I am HR certified, but anyways, it just wasn't for me, and so I opted to stay in payroll. Let's see. Got another question. Can we talk about the 2020 changes to the W-4? Employees are often confused why they don't have enough federal taxes withheld. Absolutely. So in 2020, they changed the W-4 form, which is the form that employees complete usually during, the new hire process, onboarding process. And it tells the employer how to set them up in the payroll system to determine how much federal income tax will be withheld. Now, if you look at the 2019 version of the W-4, it was small and it was simple. And leave it to our government. Their 2020 form, so if you happen to be at a computer, you can pull them up and look side by side. But their new, simpler version is way longer and also is just a complete paradigm shift because if you've been working for any period of time, you've always had kind of the same form. And now they changed it. And just like anything else with payroll, of course, you can go and read the W-4 instructions, the pages and pages that follow the worksheet, but nobody does that. And the intent of the form was actually so that people don't get a refund. Now that sounds bad, but their philosophy was so that they don't overpay, because people get really excited about their income tax refund, but all that is a free loan that you gave the government. You owe them taxes, and if you get a return, that means you overpaid your taxes. So anyways, the new form was designed to basically make it more accurate. And so in the previous form, you would enter just a number of exemptions, and that was it. If you had 3 kids, you put 3, you had 3 exemptions. That's what went into the payroll system. Well, now they've changed that specific section to where you have 2 different levels of dependents. One is at $2,000 a piece, which could change to $2,500 depending on what happens with those tax bills that are in question. And the other is a $500 credit dependent. So depending on how many of each dependent you have to do a little math, and then you move that total credit amount, so a dollar amount, over to the right side of the form. What this does though, so if you have 2 children, for example, 2 times $2,000 would be a $4,000 credit. What this actually does in the payroll system though, is it will take that credit, divide that by the total number of checks you get in a year. So if you have, biweekly, it would be 26 checks, for example. And it's going to calculate your income tax due based on your wage amount, how often you're paid, also if you're doing married, singled, etc. And then after that calculation, it will reduce it by that credit amount. So previously, in that same example, if you had that $4,000 child credit, that was not captured in the W-4. You received that $4,000 credit when you filed your income tax return. Well, now that $4,000 credit you're getting back throughout the year, which then reduces your refund or return at the end of the day. So I think a lot of employees have been surprised. And even though this form has now been around, for 4 filing seasons, so it came out in 2020, but it's, through 2024 filing, people still are not used to this form. So what we try to explain to people that they don't often know is, even if you are married, for example, you are allowed to put single on your W-4 form. That doesn't change anything about your actual tax filing, but it will increase the amount of tax withheld on your paycheck. Likewise, if you have 2 children, first of all, make sure if you have a spouse that you are not both claiming the children, because if you each claim $4,000 in credits for a total $4,000 credit, you've now reduced, you're going to end up owing the government that additional $4,000. But, for me personally, as an example, I have 2 kids. On my W-4, I put 0 dependent credits because I prefer to give the government free money throughout the year and get the refund. It's just I think it's kind of ingrained in us that that happens once a year and people rely on that for savings or vacation or, whatever. Um, but so you don't have to complete that form. If you understand what the form does, that will help you to better fill it out. So if you are one of those employees who has ended up owing or not getting the refund that you desired, some ways to increase the federal income tax withholding are to change your status on the W 4. So if you're married or head of household, change it to single. That will increase the tax. You can reduce the dependent credits that you are claiming. And then you can also check the box for 2 jobs. If you have a spouse that's working, make sure that box is checked because that does affect the tax calculation. And then lastly, you can also include an additional amount to withhold at the bottom of that form, which will then go through all the calculations and then just tack on that amount for each check. I think a lot of people, a lot of employees use, like a TurboTax option. A lot of times they don't have an accountant or a CPA that they're working with, but there are a lot of tools available online if you are running up against this year after year. Why every year am I paying? Change your W-4. There's again, the status you're claiming, the dependents you're claiming, the additional withholding that you have added, all options to increase the federal income tax withholding. And even if you haven't done that yet this year, but you want to, the W-4 form doesn't have any deadlines or due dates. So, if you want to change it multiple times throughout the year, you can. It's not too late to do that for this year if you ended up owing when you filed your tax. Another question, is Workday better than ADP? I couldn't tell you. We don't use either, so I can't really weigh in on that. Of course, ADP is the OG of payroll. They've kind of always been around, but we've seen so many new platforms come up. I would say just do your research if you're looking for a payroll platform. Look at reviews, look at customer reviews, talk to people who are on the platform, and really important too with picking a payroll system. Try and find someone that's in your same industry, the same size business, the same types of needs, because what works well for one company and its needs may not work as well for a different company. So, if you're a company that is super small and needs high service level, that is going to greatly impact your choice of payroll providers versus someone who's, 1,000 employees in 40 states. So there's not really a one size fits all. I don't think any payroll companies are necessarily good or bad. They're just not always the right fit. So just do your research is what I would say. Well, we have gone a little over the time that we had slated here. So I'll just wait a couple more minutes if anyone has any questions. What is your understanding on the PAGA changes in California? I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's a typo. PAGA bill. That's not a typo. Plaintiffs Attorneys General's Act. I don't know if that's what you meant, but if it is, I have no idea what that is. But I'll look. And then you can make sure you follow us for the next time we're live, and then I'll have an answer for you then. But as of right now, that is not on my radar, so I'm not sure. All right. Well, this was my first live, so in all honesty, I don't even know how many people have joined or on what platforms. But it was fun coming on and kind of rattling about payroll. So, if you do have questions, we plan to continue doing this maybe on a more regular basis. No, you cannot. Well, question. Can I ask you a question about girls? No. But anyways, so thank you all for those who joined. This was actually more fun than I thought it would be. Had a little panic attack yesterday, but all good now. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. And again, stay tuned because we will do this again. Thanks, guys.